luister na Isak Du Plessis op Nuuspod.
Goeiemôre, baie welkom by Nuuspod en in Nuuspod se ateljee vanoggend het ons vir in Engels sê dan nou Reverend June Major. In Afrikaans het ons jou Dominee genoem, June. Goeiemôre, baie welkom by Nuuspod.
Goeiemôre en baie dankie.
Ons lag nou lekker, maar die saak waaroor ons gesels, dis 'n baie ernstige saak. En een wat nou nog nie regtig wyd in die media oor berig word nie. June, ek gaan net so vinnig noem en dan kan jy nou maar die besonderhede invul. Maar June is 'n predikant in die Anglikaanse kerk en sy is deur 'n kollega verkrag en dit lyk asof die Anglikaanse kerk se topbestuur probeer om hierdie saak onder die mat in te vee terwyl sy probeer om geregtigheid te kry. June, gee 'n bietjie vir ons meer besonderhede oor wat gebeur het. Wat is dit? Waaroor is dit wat jy op die oomblik in die hof is in stryd met die kerk?
Baie dankie. And as I said, I hope you don't mind me speaking in English because my Afrikaans is not that well, so I'll just do it in justice as I speak. So I was raped 18 years ago by a priest within the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. I informed my bishop about it shortly afterwards, and he had told me to remain silent for the sake of the church, to protect the name of the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, because it is such a massive, big institution. He also said that I should consider my rapist and his family, his wife, and the fact that they recently lost a child, and that basically told me that I have taken a vow of canonical obedience to my bishop on my ordination. And so I need to do what he's telling me to do. And I need to keep silent because it's not about me. It is about the institution, the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. I go public and then I will bring this church into disrepute, knowing full well that I do love the church and the fact I was just newly ordained as a deacon in the church, a transitional deacon, my bishop threatening me, constantly threatening me, which over the years was very difficult because within the silence, somebody else whom I interviewed, a male survivor of rape by a Roman Catholic priest, and he said that within the silence, the darkness manifested itself. So as I remained silent, it literally honestly ate away at me. I had nightmares. I had triggers. I got migraines. It really affected me. It was so hard ministering in the same diocese as my rapist. And I constantly being silenced. And I'm saying this because people always say break silence. To me, it was, I had to break the fear before I could break the silence because I was fearful of my bishop. I was fearful of this institution that was threatening me. And so often people say break the silence. And you have to first break the fear. And it took me a long time. I was a single mother. It took me a long time to actually come to the point where I had to break the fear. To a point where in 2014, I think, when I told my bishop I need to move to another diocese and I first need to go on holiday. And he agreed with me, everything was fine. And when it came, and then I reported the rape eventually. I found the strength. And when I actually found the strength was that a family member of mine's daughter was raped and by another family member of his. And I told him, you need to report the matter. And he said, but it's family. We can't put the family in disrepute. And then I took a step back and I thought, I'm being hypocritical. How can a family member report it even though it's family? Yet I'm doing the same thing. I'm silent because it's the church and because I'm being told to be silent and to protect the church. So many of us do that. We keep quiet to protect the family, to protect the church. So then I laid a criminal charge of rape. It happened in Makanda on the property of the Anglican Church, the college in Grahamstown, which is now called Makanda. It happened there. So for a long time, I never went back to that house where it happened. And I was told my docket first disappeared, of course. Then I was told by a police officer in Grahamstown that I should remember that Archbishop Thabo Makgoba is well loved in Grahamstown. When that was said, I knew that I do not stand a chance. My witnesses, the ones whom I told, are all priests today. So they too remained silent out of fear of losing job. So when I broke the silence eventually, it was a tough journey for me because they literally crippled me financially. So when I received an offer for a job and I applied, the interview was accepted, my bishop withheld my papers, which meant I could not work. I could not apply for a post anywhere as a priest. And that is basically most of my life has been in priesthood. So I could not apply for a post, and eventually my money ran out and I had nothing. I started selling my possessions. I sold my furniture. I sold my car just so that I could pay for rent where I was staying and for food. And eventually there was nothing more left to sell. I made an urgent appeal to the Archbishop, which fell on deaf ears, absolutely deaf ears. So in 2016, I went on a hunger strike outside the offices of the bishop, the then bishop in Zonnebloem. And it lasted 7 days in an urgent appeal to actually get the Archbishop to speak with me, to actually instruct the bishop to give my papers. So on day 7, he eventually came out and he spoke with me privately. He wanted to speak privately with me. He had pen and paper, made certain promises, of which he never kept a single one. He said he'd meet with me. He never did. In fact, I had a meeting with the bishop at the time. He's retired since last year, and with the dean of the cathedral in their legal offices. And then I took an attorney with me, and I'll never forget that day. I just finished hunger strike. I looked my bishop in the eyes, and the one thing his attorney said to me was that I need to remove my Facebook posts because it's putting his family, my bishop's family, in a very difficult situation, and they are being embarrassed by it. And I said, I will not, because I also have a family. I have a son, and he sees me suffering at the hands of the church. I remember looking my bishop in his eyes. I said to him that I'm appealing to the God conscience within him. I told him I'm a single mother. I have no husband to support me. Without an income, without a job, I'm basically on the streets. And I also said to him, I'm appealing to him as a man who's married to a woman who's got a girl child to know that South Africa is in the midst of a femicide. It's not safe for women on the street. He looked me straight in the eyes and he said, no, he won't give it. That's when I wrote on a piece of paper to my attorney and said, I cannot do this. Let's go the civil route. So that's when I started a civil route to actually sue the church for loss of income. My life since then has been pretty hard. I've not seen the Archbishop for 4 years, from 2016 to 2020. In that 4-year period, I literally, when my money was up, I literally honestly ended up on the streets some nights. I literally lived on the streets at times, just walking the street where I had absolutely nowhere to go to. And I'll never forget one night that I used to have a silver chain around my neck, a cross, and one night I never ate, I think, for about 3 or 4 days. And I was walking, it was raining, it was cold. And I came past this group of homeless people. And they had a little galley, with a fire in the tin, whatever. And the one man cautioned me to come. And Stan was an elderly man, I'll never forget that. And I came there and I was hungry. And he was eating moldy bread. And I stood by the fire and it warmed me up. Another young guy ran past, pulled my chain off my neck, but luckily it broke and it fell down to my top. This man then gave me a slice, and it was an elderly white man with a beard. I'll never forget his face. He had white beard and hair that was white and black. And he gave me a slice of his moldy bread. And I looked at it and I saw the mold, but then I saw this man eating his bread and I thought, you know what? It's good enough for him to eat this. And he, not my bishop, not my fellow clergy who know I'm homeless, who knows I'm hungry, who knows I have nowhere to go, not my bishop, not my archbishop, but this homeless man has given me a slice of his last, of his bread, as moldy as it was. I ate it and I honestly just swallowed, and it actually filled me. And I'll never forget that man. I actually went back and I never saw him again. But if he is listening or anyone knows an elderly man with grey hair, just an elderly white man, say thank you. So I ended up there. I eventually then went to KZN. I stayed in a shelter, a filthy, dirty shelter. That's when I first discovered bed bugs for the first time in my life. My son suffered tremendously. He was working. He wasn't working at the time. He was young. He was still studying. Times he had to sleep in his car. He had an old car. He eventually had to sell it. He stayed by family members of mine, and it was tough on him as well. It was really hard. And the fact that I'm divorced and my son, from an abusive husband and father to my son, being separated from my son was the worst pain this church could have put on me, in all honesty. So for these 4 years was tough. I eventually found a job in Durban at a low-income lodge, where it was the people that came in with drunk. I got beaten up a few times. At once, I was held up at gunpoint during the night, where I was tied up with cable ties, where I was beaten in my face with guns, AK-47s. They tried to rob us. In an attempt to escape, I fell on metal rods that kind of caused friction, and it caused flames. So underneath my makeup, my face is it's bent. It's got dark brown blackish marks, which I don't even go in public without covering it up, which is a constant reminder to me. So I suffered a lot. COVID happened, and of course I was once again without work. And so in 2021, being again without work, I'm going to be 52. I've been applying sending my CV out for work, going from place to place, people taking me in, moving from place to place, not knowing how I'm going to pay my rent, going without food. 2021, the 1st of July, I then went on another hunger strike outside the Archbishop of Southern Africa's premises in Bishop's Court. And I first thought, gosh, as a Bishop's Court, those people are probably going to phone me. Those are wealthy people. I pitched a tent. Somebody gave a tent on the pavement there. And I thought those wealthy people are probably going to phone the police for me. But to the contrary, they were actually very kind. My neighbor actually offered me a go and shower every day, use the bathroom, brought me a hot water bottle every night. And so being outside there on the first day of my hunger strike, the Archbishop was very cold. He was actually quite vicious in his response. And I said to him, I have absolutely nothing. I have no income. I need to have a job. I need my papers. I also said to him, I'd like an internal investigation to what my rapist had done to me. And this time, and he said, yes, it will be done. And I said, no, this time I want it in writing, because the last time I took your word for it and you did not come through. And then again, I was a week on hunger strike, and he gave me the link for Safer Churches. And I applied, and that was last year, July. I started the process with what's called the Safer Churches process. But I just want to say, before I actually go to that part, that when I was on hunger strike in 2016, I have amazing stories. In the pain that I was in Zonnebloem, a community in Zonnebloem had made a massive banner which said 11 June major on hunger strike. So the bishop's offices was also on the grounds. There's a primary school and a high school in Zonnebloem. And how God worked was just amazing, because one day a little child, and it's children from the townships, like Khayelitsha and all those places, a little child in primary school came to me after school, whole day. This child kept their lunch in a lunchbox, brought it to me and gave it to me. And I said, what is this? And this child, in pure innocence, pointed to the banner which says 11 June on hunger strike, saw the word hunger, did not understand what hunger strike was, but identified with the word hunger and said, this is for you because you are hungry. That blew me away, and I had to sit this child down and said, I'm okay, you eat your bread, I'm okay. Another primary school one came to this one man, Buddha Aslam was with me every day, watching me, protecting me. And this primary school child came and gave him a few cents. I'm not sure it was 20 cents or 50 cents. But there were people selling sweets outside. And Buddha Aslam said to the child, I'm not selling sweets. And the child said, this is not for sweets. This is to say thank you for looking after the auntie. And another high schooler comes and saying, can I pray for you? And in the middle of this hunger strike, this teenager lays hands on me and prays for me. So I was so blessed. And I realized that if only we be like children. And here I am as a priest up against an institution who's supposed to be speaking about faith and God, but they are not the ones feeding me. It's the little children. It's the homeless. And Jesus says, when I was hungry, did you feed me? And here the hungry is actually feeding me. The child is actually feeding me, who is in a state of poverty. And so it touched me deeply, and it moved me deeply that to this day, I have a very soft spot for homeless people, because you do not know this story. I too was homeless. So 2021 hunger strike, I eventually told him, no, Archbishop, until you put it in writing, well, I believe you. He put it in writing. The process started. It's been a long journey since July. Every time it's been I had my Zoom interview with Safer Churches in October last year, in which they said when the board of preliminary inquiry is done, I can go public. At that stage, I can go public with the name of my rapist, which brought me to about February month. Again, they postponed it, said I cannot go public. I need to say that after I started this process for years and years and years, and as a rape survivor, rape is a lifetime sentence. It honestly is a lifetime sentence put on the survivor. So last year, October, I decided with a group of ladies from 1 Billion Rising, 5 of them went with me. I wanted to go back to my crime scene, to that particular house in which I was raped. It was the house which was the dean of studies at the time of the college. It was him staying there. But over the years, it changed and it became student residence. So these 5 ladies went with me and I told them I'm going to get some flowers. Somebody was kind enough to buy me flowers because I don't have an income. So they bought me flowers, and I said, I'm not going inside the house. I cannot do that. As we came to the house, it looked very dilapidated because it was no longer in use and it was literally falling apart. The ladies and I were chatting outside and we were talking. And as they were talking, I somehow found myself walking to the house because my stomach was turning on the inside. I'm sorry if I'm emotional now. Yeah. But as I went inside that house, it looked, they made some changes because students were there. So they wanted off some of the places, the rooms. But I went into that room. And on that dreadful night, I could not shout. And at first I thought it was because the children were in the house. But it's not. I literally went numb. And as I was in that room, I felt that same pain of that night. That house inside was falling apart. It was moldy. And it looked to me, it symbolized the old and the rot within the Anglican Church right now as it's falling apart. I went into that room and I couldn't shout. I tried to scream the name of the ladies that were with me or one of their names, and I couldn't. The words couldn't come out. I fell down and I literally had to hold onto the wall and crawl out into the passage because I felt like that night where nothing could come out. I could not scream. In the passage, I broke down. I wept and I wept from a pain so deep that I've cried many nights, but I've not cried so deep from my soul, from the depth of my being. And I wept and I wept. And I still could not call a name to come and help me. I could not shout Lucinda, Latifa, Yolanda. I could not call their names. I was just numb. As I wept, I heard someone calling Latifa, calling my name and say, Reverend June. I could not answer. I could not respond to say, I'm here. And in the passage in front of that room, I was crying. Somebody held me. I found out after it's because one of the ladies then recorded it. And I'm actually glad they recorded it because it shows me moving from pain to power. As she held me, I wept. And then another person came and held me and she started praying for me quiet, softly. And as she prayed softly, I recognized the voice. It was that of Lucinda Evans. And as she prayed for me, I realized that I'm not alone. That night I was alone. But today, as they were holding me, I realized that these women are with me now. I'm not alone. And as she prayed, coincidentally, the name of the college is called the College of the Transfiguration. That's the Anglican Seminary in Grahamstown. As Lucinda softly prayed for me, I felt myself being transfigured. I literally, at that point, only that point after 18 years, at that point, I was able to transition from pain to power. At that point, I took my power back. At that point, he's not going to control me. That room that helped, that was the nightmares. That room was where all my nightmares began, will no longer have power over me. So I took my power back. Just to say that many survivors of rape have committed suicide or attempted suicide because it becomes so painful. You are silenced because when you speak out, you are vilified. You are called terrible names. You are said that you looked for it, the way you were walking, the way you were dressed, where you were. No one's going to believe you because he's a priest, etc. So I've ministered and I counsel a lot of people who've come through rape. who attempted suicide. Even a 12-year-old boy, 3 months ago, a 15-year-old girl who slashed her wrist in the third attempt to commit suicide because the rapist is out on 1,000 rand bail. So I also attempted suicide when I knew I was going to face the streets and live on the street. I had nowhere to go. My son was still a young person and he had no place himself to live. So I too attempted suicide and I had to ask God to forgive me. A friend of mine phoned and I got saved at British Care Hospital. And I had to ask God to forgive me. I had to ask my son to forgive me. I'm still struggling to forgive myself, but I will never ever do it again because the thought of my son being without a parent because he has an absent father, I cannot live with that. So that is what victims and survivors of rape do. You take that pain and your perpetrator continue to have power over you. And it was only last year when I took my power back, moved from pain to power. And coming back to Cape Town, again, I continued the fight. The process with Safer Churches has been a very frustrating process. It gets postponed after postponed. I have to constantly email. They take a while to respond. And in this whole process, and so eventually, the present bishop had emailed me with a timeline and said, once these processes of 14 working days, 20 working days has been completed, then I can go public with his name. I emailed him back and said, I will honor only this timeline because there's been too many delays. And my priest, my rapist, continues to minister to this very day. Yet my papers are being withheld and I'm still unemployed. I send my CV out every single day. COVID doesn't help. I'm still unemployed. My rent is due this month. I don't even know how I'm going to pay it. So there's always the fear of, am I going to go back into a shelter? COVID has affected my son as well. He had to move in back with his in-laws. So he's not on his own either. And so how do I face all of this? And so I said to them, the 12th of March is the date, according to this timeline, Bishop, that you've given me, that I will go public. And I will only on timeline and no delays. I sent that email also to Safer Churches. And I said the 12th of March, I'm going public with his name, which I did. Safer Churches emailed me, I think the day before the time, saying that there's been an extension because his attorney had requested an extension. Again, the rapist gets preferential treatment. Again, the fact that I said I will not accept any delays is going on since July last year, the application. Again, he got preferential treatment. So I said I will still go public, which I did. I chose to go public on the steps of St. George's Cathedral because that is where I was ordained. I went public there, and the backlash has been that my rapist, and that's why I was in court yesterday, my rapist then applied for a gag order and a cost order. And so my fights are appeared in court yesterday. So what he had done, his attorney, Limburg attorneys, had sent me an email on Friday, 26 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, outside of court hours, over a long weekend. So the long weekend, we had Monday, a public holiday, telling me I need to give my opposing response by Wednesday at 10 a.m. I gave my response at Wednesday about 5. And then when I came to court yesterday, it gave me one day. There was no time for me to even try and get legal representation. So when I came to court yesterday, the attorney says to the judge that the fact that I only responded at 5 o'clock to say that I will oppose, she takes it to mean that I'm not opposing. So basically what this rapist then does, they rape you, they apply for a gag order, and then for that gag order. And that is unacceptable. So I went to court, and the judge had then said that, I said I did not have time to respond because she gave me one day in which to find someone, which I was not able to do. And then he said to me, an offer was put on that we come back to court on the 24th of May, but within that interim, I personally will not mention his name on my personal Facebook account and on my justice account. So that I have, and then the 24th of May, I have a time to come with an attorney or an advocate to properly argue the case. And this case is so important for me because, and I agree to it because it is important to me, this case. Because if he agrees, if he's successful in his gagging order, then what are we saying to all survivors of rape? That you are not allowed to speak out. He's using the system, he's using the Constitution to continue to rape us. So I have decided that if this gagging order is issued on the 24th of May, God willing, I will be in contempt of that gagging order. I've got this time in which to prepare. I do not have an advocate. I've been making an appeal for pro bono or an organization to actually cover his or her costs to fight this matter. Because it's not just about me. It's about every survivor out there. If I give up, I've received endless messages from people saying, I'm too afraid to go public because this will happen to me. So that has been my appeal. Last year, August, on Women's Day, the ladies of 1 Billion Rising had decided to have a panty demonstration where they hung new panties on the fence at Bishop's Court in protest. And I remember it was raining that day, and a reporter was interviewing the head of 1 Billion Rising SA and asked her why panties. And when that question was asked in the day, I actually burst into tears because the reason why panties were was because one of the questions the detective asked me was, what panties was I wearing that night? And that is just the way in which you are questioned. And at that moment, when the reporter asked the question, I realized that basically the last thing between you and your rapist is in fact your panty. And the fact that a detective even asked me such a question was just so sick, because bottom line is it makes no difference. The door was closed. It was in the privacy of a room where I found myself in, and he had no right to enter that room. So the other lines of questioning was quite sick. And certain senior clergy persons within the church were offended by panties and not by the rape, and had called me satanic, diabolical, that the church must doom me to hell. And I can say his name, it was Reverend Barney Patiana, because he had publicly posted, he had said it to the Cape Times, and it was headline news on the lamppost, the poster saying, Reverend doomed to hell. And they supported him. So now I find myself, Safer Church has put out a press release yesterday or the day before, trying to explain why they done the extension, saying that the canons does allow for extension, but they do not say that they've been extending for so long, and it's been happening since July last year, and that I did in fact say that I will not accept any more extensions. So this is where I'm at. So the 24th of May, God willing, if I do not find any legal representation, I've got a month before the 24th of April to give my opposing response to the court. I will then have to have a quick study on law to train and equip myself so that I do not do an injustice to other rape survivors, because this case will set precedent either for the perpetrators or for the survivors. And I am fighting to set precedent for the survivors. You know, I'm appealing even to the president of this country, because at the end of the day, we have wonderful rules and laws in place on paper, but in practice, it's not being implemented. In practice, we as survivors are not being protected. We need the laws to be changed. A gagging order should not even have come to the court to be accepted by a perpetrator. So precedent will be set. And I'm saying today, I will not, on the 24th of May, 2021, if precedent is set that rapists can get away with gagging orders, I will be in contempt of court. If it means that I will be arrested, then so be it. I've lost everything already. I've honestly lost everything. The bed that I sleep in is not even my own bed. I'm struggling to survive financially and to keep myself up. And there's two things they're not going to take from me. They will not rob me of my faith in God, and they will not rob me of my smile. I will continue to smile through the pain. And if it means I end up homeless again, if it means I end up in a shelter again, so be it. I will die, and with my last breath, I will say, arise, but I will not give in to rapist, gagging survivors. I will not do that. Too many survivors are saying, we're watching on the outcome of this to know that you are paving a safe way for us to go through where we can speak out. To the people out there, you know, I received messages and comments saying, but he's my uncle. He would not have done this. He's my friend. Rapists are one of us. They're not aliens from another planet. It's someone's uncle, someone's friend, someone's husband, someone's grandfather, someone's brother, someone's son. It's a neighbor, it's a partner. It is someone whom we know. doesn't mean that you know the person that they're not capable of rape. So yes, I continue this fight, and I thank you for having me here. But this fight is not just about me. This fight is about every survivor of rape. South Africa is the rape capital of the world. As a survivor, I'm saying, no, I don't want this rape capital of the world. Because as I'm speaking now, someone is being raped. Within the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, women are being raped, but boys have been raped for decades and decades and decades. And those priests continue to minister. I was in the West Coast with 1 Billion Rising 2 weekends ago. And while I was there, an Anglican priest sent me a WhatsApp message saying, while you're in the West Coast, go to liefhet. Because at St. Christopher's Chapel, boys were lured there and they were raped by the priest. So we went to liefhet. And as I went inside the church grounds, there was a school, and I realized those boys at that school were probably raped. For so long, the previous bishop said, I'm crazy, I'm making up the stories, that no boys have been raped, that I've not been raped, to protect the name of the church. So myself and another lady went in and she recorded me speaking there. The other 3 ladies were on the outside and a man joined them from the area. When I came on the outside and joined them, they told me that this man had just said that there was a priest here, and I can say his name because it's been in the public. Reverend David Daniels, was deceased now. And he said, hy het gehou van die manne en die seuns. I know that he raped boys, and he was the biggest pedophile priest ever. Nothing came of him. He raped the boys, and then he just moved into another church. He was in Lieblik, he was in Blackheath, and wherever he went to, every church, he raped the boys. Those boys are men now. He's not the only priest who raped the boys. Those boys are men now. They are too afraid to stand up against this institution, because look what they do to you when you stand up against them. When you stand up against rapist priests. For years, they've been protecting them. Last year, on the 24th of September, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba gave a press statement on the day when I celebrated the 15th anniversary to my ordination and I had a service. He gave a press statement confessing that the Anglican Church has been complicit to gender-based violence within the church. He also confessed that male priests have protected and covered up for perpetrators to protect the name of the family. He confessed that. And that is exactly what happened to me. It took me 2 hunger strikes to get the church to that point to actually make that confession. But after making that confession, he continues to silence me to protect the name of the church. So how does that confession how does it bear any strength when you're continuing to do it? The Archbishop, since my hunger strike in 2021, has not reached out to me again. He knows I'm unemployed. He's not offered me a slice of bread. Some supporters have reached out to him by email and saying, listen, Reverend June does not have a place to stay. Can you give her one of the vacant rectories? He did not even respond to that. He has not offered me communion. Each day I send out my CV. I've still got no work. I still have to, each day I'm in survivor mode, and I'm 52 and will be 52 in June. And I'm like, what's going to become of me? Where am I going to end up? Where will I live? I don't have a place to go home. I'm not getting income. And each day, that is my fight. And I had to accept the fact that if I literally honestly end up in the shelter till my dying day, then so be it. But I'm not going to be gagged. Because if I'm gagged, I'm telling every other survivor, you have to be silent. And I
This is not a good start for the day. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, I can't even talk now. But sure. Thank you for sharing your story. And oh, June. It's a terrible, terrible story. And I hope something come of it. And thank you for sharing it with us. And all the best of luck to you.
Baie dankie.
Mens weet nie wat om te sê in die aangesig van soveel vergryp. soveel vergryp teen mense wat lief is vir 'n instelling en wat enige iets sal doen om aan daai instelling te behoort. Enige iets sal doen om daai instelling te dien. Om op die manier hanteer te word is net onbegryplik. Dit is net so absoluut onbegryplik. As jy tot hier geluister het, dan wil ek jou tog vra om te kyk of jy nie daar kan help om June se saak te help deurvoer nie. Of jy nie daar kan help om June se lewe makliker te maak nie. Dis maar as jy so kan sien. As dit so is, laat weet vir my, kontak my. My besonderhede is op my Facebookblad en dan kyk ons of ons van daar af kan werk. Dankie dat jy tot hier geluister het.